My name is Jerry Gill. Today is July 19th, 2010. I'm visiting with Dr. Norman Durham on the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is for the O-State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Norm, thank you for taking time to visit with me today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay. I want to visit with you about your 41-year career at Oklahoma State University. Man, 41 years, that's a long time, Norm.
Stretches out there pretty long, doesn't it?
But first of all, could we back up and could you share a little bit of information about your early life, about your family, where you grew up?
I was born in Ranger, Texas, and then when I was about 9 months old, we moved to Eastland, Texas.
And what's that close to, Norm?
Well, that's between Abilene and Fort Worth on
Okay.
Highway 20. It's about 100 miles west of Fort Worth, and on the Edwards Plateau area. And I graduated from high school from Eastland, Texas, and then went directly into the service. I was in the U.S. Navy in the Second World War. And then when I was discharged from the Navy, I came back and I started school at North Texas State University in Denton. And I did my baccalaureate degree there and my master's degree, and then I went to the University of Texas at Austin for my doctorate. And I did my work there in microbiology and biochemistry. Met my bride, my wife, there at the University of Texas, and we were married in '52, and then in '54 I got my degree. She's also a graduate. She has her bachelor's from the University of Texas.
Well, let me back up again just a minute. Ask you, growing up, any brothers, sisters you had?
I'm an only child,
Okay.
and you know, I may have missed some things in life, but then I had lots of attention, and and you know, not too many years ago, we were down home, and my mother, she looked at me and she said, Norman, she said, you're losing your hair and you're getting a pot. And I said, Mother, I'm your only child. How can you say that? And she says, you're losing your hair and getting a pot. So,
Norman, what did your father do for a living?
He was a chemist for Texas Electric Service Company, and he also ranched. And we raised cattle and goats during the time that I was growing up. My mother was a school teacher, and she taught school in Ranger, and then when we moved to Eastland, she was offered a principalship job there at one of the South Ward schools. And then she later had the distinction of being the first woman ever appointed to the Texas State Textbook Committee. So she was a very accomplished woman in her own right, as was my father in his profession.
So education was highly valued in your family?
Education was highly valued, although my father did not have a college education. When he graduated from high school, he went into the Army in World War I. And so then when he was discharged, well, he went into business for himself, and then met my mother, and they were married and lived in Ranger, Texas for several years there.
Were there some values that you learned from growing up in your family, you know, experiences that influenced your success later in life?
Oh, I think some of the values would be that you know, always respect the rights of others, work hard, try to do the right things, don't be afraid to apologize if you make a mistake, and you know, in doing so, I think to blend and make a fellowship with other people, so that as you proceed and progress through life, that you always have a lot of friends, and you always have an opportunity to contribute to the livelihood and the activities of your community and your family. But you know, I think just we came up during the Depression stages, and I used to laugh, but I don't know whether you remember the old automobile Terraplane Hudson. The name doesn't ring, but you're too young. But my family purchased a 1936 Terraplane, four-door vehicle that they drove for 18 years. And so, that's a long time, but times were not easy, and we were really worked together to try to make the best of it. When I was in the service, I used to send money home, and my father used that to buy livestock and also to buy a little more land so that he could pursue his ranching interest. But
growing up, did you work on the ranch?
I did. We lived in town.
Okay.
Mother taught school, but we worked out on the ranch. It was about 6 miles from town, at a little town called Martin Valley. And so we worked on the ranch, and then I ran a paper route, and I worked in a drugstore at the counter as a dispenser of food and drinks and the like. And that was back, when Cokes were 10 cents and movies were a dime and some of those types of things. But those were my principal occupations.
You learned about hard work, though, growing up, sounded like discipline, hard work.
Yeah. And I laugh now because back then when I ran the paper route, for about 6 years, and I had the same bicycle all the time now. And now people that ride bicycles think they have to have a bicycle for pleasure, and a bicycle for racing, a bicycle for going up hills and down hills. It's kind of interesting. But then after I got my master's, I went to the University of Texas and completed my degree there in '54. And Jane and I moved here with the family, and I accepted a position as an assistant professor in the Department of Microbiology at what was then Oklahoma A&M College.
Well, you mind if I just one more time, then I want to ask you back up. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in World War II? What year did you go in?
I went in '44.
Okay.
And at the time when I went in, I thought I was going to be an MD, a doctor, when I came out as a profession. So I went into the hospital as a hospital apprentice rating, and went through boot camp in San Diego, and then went through a hospital corps school in the San Diego area, and then was assigned to the 1st Marine Division in Camp Pendleton because the Navy provided the medics. But right about that time, they bombed Japan, and they began to cut back on their forces, and I was one of the fortunate ones in that I never did have to go overseas. But I stayed with the Marine Corps for a while, and then came back into the Navy and served in the U.S. Naval Hospital that was located at that time in New Orleans, and then was discharged from New Orleans. So I was in for a total of about 18 months.
So Norman, you went to North Texas State University.
Mm-hmm.
You majored in biology and microbiology.
Biology.
So did you change your mind about medical school then?
Chemistry. Well, I began to like research, and I liked teaching. So I thought I'd just probably go ahead and try to develop a career in the biological sciences area. And so that has worked out well, and we've been very blessed.
What why microbiology? What appealed to you about microbiology?
Well, when I was doing my undergraduate work, my bachelor's work, I had the opportunity at North Texas to teach a couple of courses. I was a student teacher. And one of them was the beginning microbiology class, and I just developed an interest in the fact that one doesn't want to ever underestimate the power of the microbe. And so I thought I'd just follow microbiology up. And then when I got my master's degree, well, I was offered a scholarship at the University of Texas in the Department of Microbiology. So I went down and worked for a scholar down there, Dr. Orville Weiss, and did my graduate work under him. And so then we moved to Stillwater.
Well, you had mentioned earlier that you accepted the position of assistant professor at Oklahoma State in 1954, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a story about how you accepted the offer at Oklahoma State? You must have had other offers as well.
I did. I had an offer from Duke University, and I had an opportunity to go as an instructor to the University of Wisconsin. But both of our folks were in Texas at the time. Jane's folks lived in Muleshoe, Texas. And this, I guess this university and its tie to some agricultural interest and our interest in the agricultural phase of life prompted us to stay close to home. There are always times when you go back and look and say, you wonder if you made the right decision. But because both of those universities were extremely well thought of and very prominent in academic circles, and I was very pleased to have offers, but I just thought that this would be the best place for us.
You had an amazing career at Oklahoma State. You moved through the active ranks to full professor in 1961. In addition to your outstanding teaching and research accomplishments, you served in several key administrative positions, including Dean of the Graduate College for, I believe, 24 years. That's a long time to be Dean of any college, much less graduate.
It is.
But I'd like to visit about your 10 years Dean of the Graduate School. But first, can we talk a little bit about the history of the Graduate College? Do you know when graduate studies began at Oklahoma State?
Oh, they begin very early. In fact, in the back of this graduate format, I'd have to refer back to that, but there were 2 or 3 people that were in charge of graduate studies before it became a college, graduate college. And I could look back through that if you were interested. But
seemed like around 1911, I read in there somewhere, maybe it was the first graduate course offerings.
There were, yes. They go back that far, and then it began to increase in popularity and begin to become more important. And probably one of the people that made a very significant contribution was Bob Mcvicker. And Dr. Mcvicker was here as vice president. Later went on to become president at the University of Oregon, I think. But he was a scholar. He's a biochemist, and he was a scholar in his own right. And I suppose when I interviewed here, he was one of the people that Dr. Lynn Gee, who was head of bacteriology at that time, had scheduled me for an interview, and I was very impressed with Dr. Mcvicker and with his thoughts and foresights with what the future was for the university. And that probably helped along with other things in my decision process. But yeah, the graduate program has been here for a long time, and then kind of began to grow in interest as people realized that research and graduate activities are very important in contributions that are made to society, and they are very important in economic development and in industrial relationships and bringing new industries in. And I've often thought of graduate programs and research as being an investment a lot like people make in a hospital. We invest in the hospital here in Stillwater over the years, and you often wonder why you're doing that, but yet whenever something happens and you roll into the emergency room, you're extremely pleased that you've made that investment. Well, research is a lot the same way, because Stillwater and the state of Oklahoma benefit and profit from research as they look at the growth and development of industries and economic development.
And do you remember who I think, first of all, Daniel McIntosh, I believe, was the first dean of college in 1929. Does that sound about right?
I think that's right. We could look that up.
But who was your predecessor? Who preceded you in that position?
Jay Boggs.
Jay Boggs.
See, Bob Mcvicker and then Jay Boggs. And then I came in. Now, I was in Washington, D.C. My family and I lived in Washington, D.C. for about 18 months. We had built a home up on North Monroe, and I've always laughed and told my wife, I said, you know, it's I knew that you really loved me whenever you went to Washington, D.C. But when I started my research program in '54, I was very fortunate. The federal government supported my research for many years. I think I had research support from the National Institutes of Health and National Science Foundation and U.S. Atomic Energy Commission for 35 years of the time that I was active in the university. And I had been, during that period of time, I'd spent a couple of summers at Oak Ridge in the Gill on the Atomic Energy Research Program.
And then Tennessee, Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And then in early '66, well, they called and asked if I would be willing to join the Atomic Energy Commission as a program director in metabolic biology in Washington, D.C. So I came home and I told Jane about the offer. Now, we had just built the home and we'd lived in it for about 6 weeks.
Bad time.
And she said, so I said, you know, how would you like to go to Washington, D.C.? And she said, well, if that's what you'd like to do, we'll go. Yeah. So we went, and I always joke, I said, I knew she really loved me, you know, whenever she'd leave a new home. But we were back there, and I had a very great, enriching career back there. I had a chance to travel a lot of places, went to a lot of universities, went to a lot of the atomic energy research facilities, and then Dr. Com and Jay offered me the job as a dean of the graduate college. And so I decided I would come back to Stillwater. And I had, you know, there are some other ties I had. I still had 6 graduate students here that I was directing their research in absentia while I was away. But it was an excellent return, and so we came back in '67 and I started.
Would you have thought that you might stay there if you hadn't been offered this? I mean, you're looking at maybe, I'm sure you were probably going to leave at this time, but was there a possibility of you maybe leaving the university at some point if you had to come back?
There was. We were on leave at the time, and the offer to stay there was permanent. But after a period of time, I decided I really, you know, wasn't cut out for government research. So I came back, and really I wasn't cut out for the government, you know, because you experience all kinds of things. You get we had out of the office I was in about $40 million in grant support annually, which, you know, back in the '60s was a sizable program. And if somebody at a university didn't get a project, they'd complain to their congressman. Well, the congressman would want to know why, you know, so they'd send a request to the Atomic Energy Commission. And when you got those requests, you had to respond in 24 hours.
Wow.
So it was fun. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about politics, and I learned a lot about grant support, and I had the opportunity to travel for the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, and met a lot of people.
Norm, what, in your opinion, what was the status of the college when you became dean? Can you talk about what sort of, there's some markers you can give us there about the college at that time?
Yeah, I think the university and administration under Dr. Combe had just begun to give some serious thought to improving on their graduate college offerings. And I think it was becoming more and more evident that that would be an inroad that would permit Oklahoma students to go ahead and finish their graduate degrees here in some very important academic areas, maybe get jobs in this state, and also to bring other industries into the state. So it would, in general, help the overall economic base of the state. So it was beginning to grow, and if I recall correctly, back when we came in, there were about 1,600 graduate students active, and not very many programs, and so it provided an opportunity with Dr. Combe's support and Jay Boggs' support to identify areas where we had faculty expertise, where we could initiate new programs in some very critical areas imparted to Oklahoma.
You remember about how many graduate faculty we had at that time?
Oh, I think, back at that time, as far as graduate faculty, I think we had somewhere around 100,
Wow.
125. And then later, we, of course, made the push that for new hires, we would like to have an opportunity to plead the case that they needed to have some scholarly and research interest and creativity so that they could support not only the undergraduate but also the graduate program areas.
Norm, what were some of your early priorities and goals for the college? And if you had a chance to assess and look at it, what did you come up with your immediate short-term and longer-term goals?
Well, I think we started out by identifying those areas where we had some real strength. We had some awfully good faculty back when I first came into the graduate college, and it made my job much easier. But we had some very good faculty in a number of areas. Now, for the most part, those would be centered in departments in agriculture, which we had a strong base, and in some areas of engineering. But look at all the other areas within the university that offered opportunities for students to get advanced degrees and to contribute to the economic and social ramifications, of the city and state. And so we began to identify those areas of strength where we had faculty that were capable of leading and working with students as they continued in their innovative and creative graduate level activities. And then as we hired new ones, we were provided the opportunity to put some input into what areas would we feel that we might look at carefully to see if we could find someone to come in. So, the biggest thing was to identify our strengths, identify the priority areas as to where we wanted to go, and then begin to work within the university structure and the department heads and the other deans to see if we could find talent in those areas that we could entice to come to Stillwater.
Could you outline some of the basic services, programs, responsibilities of the college to help us understand that a little better? What all does it encompass?
Well, the graduate college, when I was there, we encompassed the graduate level work in all of the colleges. And so that meant that students would come in and do their graduate level work, that administratively and information-wise they would be enrolled in the graduate college. But their work is really back in the department. So we worked closely with faculty to try to help find outstanding students that we could entice to come to Oklahoma State University so that they could work back in these departments with faculty in their research and creative activities. The graduate program is only as strong as the faculty. And the success of it is only as valuable as faculty that are good researchers, that are good teachers, and that are capable of directing excellent research projects, competing for money at the national level, because that's always a problem. So we were fortunate in having some faculty that were outstanding. I've often said that I wouldn't want to trade my faculty for the faculty at another university, as I had a chance to travel to other universities on visitation teams and site teams. I became more and more impressed with the capability and talents of our faculty. And I used to laugh, kind of as an offshoot of that, there were always certain faculty that you would identify as ones that you thought were damn good, Now, how are they damn good? Well, they taught good undergraduate courses, and they taught good graduate level courses, and they were doing research, and they worked with the graduate students. And while I was in the graduate college, John Campbell funded the undergraduate research program. And so he funneled the money through the graduate college, and we put that money back into the departments. For the undergraduates, when they come in, they had the opportunity to work with a faculty member of their choosing and begin to become acquainted with the areas of research. But we had some awfully good faculty, and it was very enjoyable. And in my own personal research effort, I had joint projects with Darrell Berlin. Darrell's still here. Kurt Ebner, when he was here in the biochemistry area, and Frank Leach, when he was here in the biochemistry area. By joint projects, we would collaborate and together as a team seek funding from federal agencies, and we were extremely successful.
And what organizational changes did you make in your first few years to carry out the responsibilities of the college? I mean, there's pretty some complex responsibilities there in terms of program review, helping hire, graduate faculty, all these kind of issues. Did you make some organizational and structural changes to help, move it along?
Well, we tried to speed up the process. For example, when a graduate student would apply to the graduate college, we would send the information back to the department. They would evaluate it and let us know whether or not that student was successful. And that process back about that time could last anywhere from 3 days to 6 weeks, So we initiated the guidelines that when we send the materials back, we want you to report back in a week. And if they didn't, we'd pester them, we'd call them, because it was fair to the student. They needed to know. If they were applying somewhere else, we needed to let them know if they were going to be acceptable here, so we might get them here. We also, I think, tried to work very carefully with faculty and department heads in requirements. What did they want us to look for as we evaluated students? In the theses and dissertation, the preparation of the thesis or the dissertation were pretty firmly cut when I came in. Dr. Mcvicker was kind of a taskmaster. Ruth Farrington, his administrative assistant.
There when graduate school, I'm going to stay remember Ruth Farrington.
Was also kind of a taskmaster. Mm-hmm. And I have to ask because there were 2 or 3 things on a dissertation, faculty would come to us and say, now, we have this video of how these molecules move, can we put it in the dissertation? And of course Ruth's comment was no. Well, we changed all that, so they could use whatever techniques and activities they wanted to.
As an aside, maybe we can let the listeners in on the Ruth Farrington. Can you kind of share a little bit about what her role was, why she was so famous or infamous?
Well, she had been Dr. Mcvicker's office administrator in the graduate college for years. And she was there, I think, before he became the dean. And so she basically ran the graduate college. And right after I first came in, well, faculty would come in and they would talk to me about a particular problem or something, that they thought they might like to change, or could they do something a little bit different on this thesis or dissertation, and I would say yes, and ask them for a written request, and they'd send me one, and I'd write okay on it, and I'd give it to Ruth, because she not only handled all of the activities at the office, she also carefully scrutinized excuse me, each thesis or dissertation,
Margins and
margins and so forth and so on. So one day I was sitting at the desk and a faculty member called and said, "Do you remember us talking about that?" And I said, "Yes, I sure do." And I said, "I approve that." And he said, "Well, I thought you did, but," I said, excuse me, I said, we've turned this in, and she sent it back saying it wasn't acceptable. So I said, "Well, let me check on it." So I went in, and I said, "Ruth, do you remember such and such and such and such?" And I approved it and sent you a letter. And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, Dr. So-and-so says, they had turned something in, and it had gone back as being unacceptable." And she kind of stood there a little, kind of looked at me, and I said, come to think of it, there may be some other things that faculty have not been notified they were approved. I said, "Can you help me with that?" And she looked at me for just a few seconds, and then she reached down in her drawer and she pulled out a folder and had some letters in it, and she said, I will proceed to okay these," but she said, "You should know that Dr. Mcvicker would never have done this." So, but she was his right arm, and she was my right arm for a long time. She was good, but and she began to mellow, but it was painful.
She used to laugh. I laughed at her after she retired to shake hands and share the story. She's the one who she'd actually get up and check the your margins.
That's
and everything. Right. Every graduate student knew about Ruth Farrington.
That is correct.
She was a terror to the graduate students, I remember. Yeah.
But then, from there we moved. I think all of the women that came into the office, our first concern was students. And I used to try to tell them, I said, when students come in, if they have a problem, there's really not anything we can't do if we want to, and if it's within the scope and realm of reason of quality within the graduate college. I said, there's nothing we can't do. And so they worked with students in a lot of different ways, and I think the students begin to develop a rapport. If a student would come in or a faculty member would come in and talk to us about a problem, we could take care of it. And I used to laugh, for academic problems, one of the people that I was very fortunate and developed a real good rapport with was Raymond Gerard. And Raymond was the registrar. And so if I had a problem, I would go down to see Raymond, and I'd sit down, and you may remember that Bob Combs set up some retreats, and all of the administrators would go to the retreats for 2 or 3 days, and the first retreat I roomed with Raymond Gerard. And the second retreat I asked if I could room with Raymond Gerard. And so I roomed with Raymond because we built a rapport. And so if I had a real serious academic problem, I would go down and I'd say, Raymond, I've got a problem. And he'd say, oh, hell. And I'd say, now, here's what it is. So I'd explain the problem, and I'd say, now, I really need to find some way, to fix this. And so he'd give me all of this wealth of knowledge about what had happened in the past and what the regulations said and so forth and so on. And I used to kid him. I'd say, Raymond, it's kind of like getting a drink of water out of a fire hydrant. You just give me all of this at once, which is great. I said, I understand. It's important I understand, but now, how can I fix it? And he'd sit there, and then he'd say, well, let's do this. But lots of students that graduated don't realize, Raymond was a big help to them too. But anyway, that was, I think, an opportunity. And I thought those retreats were very good because it gave administrators an opportunity to get to know each other, begin to trust each other, and develop some real programs. So,
you talked about Raymond. Are there other individuals that you worked with in the colleges or other university administrators or graduate faculty that were important to you in helping develop the graduate college?
Oh, a lot of them.
I know there's you run the risk of leaving some names out, but are just some names that pop up in your mind?
Well, you can think of a lot of names. There were a lot of faculty that if I had a problem or a student had a problem or something, I'd call the faculty member and say, take a look at this, will you? And, I don't know, you in chemistry, Darrell Berlin, biochemistry, Kurt Ebner and Frank Leach were outstanding. Bob Terry. We used to take the graduate college staff and go over to various departments and sit down with faculty and graduate students and just talk to them, and they could ask questions and do those types of things. Sometimes I have to grope for names, but there was one in nearly every department that I could say, if I have a problem, I can send it there, and they will take a look at it and make me a decision.
Whether presidents, deans, other administrators are helpful to you?
Yeah, well, the deans were also always helpful, but they had a lot of other chores and tasks,
Sure.
And really, their graduate faculty worked through the deans, but my initial contact with a lot of students was through the graduate faculty. But I can't think of a college that we didn't have good cooperation out of the deans along with the faculty. But they were always worried. They wanted to be sure their faculty received recognition and attention for what they did, and I always tried to make sure that took place.
Looking back over your 24 years as dean, how did the college change in terms of degree programs, number of graduate faculty, graduate students, scope of responsibilities? Can you kind of highlight some of the changes over that period of time?
Oh, I don't know, what you would consider as important. I think we made a lot of progress in the research areas. We were part of the U.S. Geological Survey, National Center for Groundwater Research with Rice University and the University of Oklahoma. That was recognition. We developed avenues for research support through the colleges. We tried to build a rapport with graduate students. We had graduate a graduate student council, and we had a graduate faculty council, and the graduate student council's officers sat on the graduate faculty council. And we used the talent in those two boards for a lot of discussion and new ideas and things like that. I think we enhanced our recognition and reputation as a scholarly university. We became more competitive for monies. Our recruitment activities showed an increase in the number of graduate students. I think when I left the office, we had 4,700 graduate students. And I think during that time that we developed a process by which graduate students felt like they could provide input, faculty felt like they could provide input, the deans felt like they could provide input, and department heads. And we did that. We had quite a few social activities. For example, with the Graduate Student Council. Were you ever on that council? We would have a steak fry every year and invite them out. We'd invite the Graduate Faculty Council and the Graduate Student Council, and that gave them an opportunity to talk to each other and get acquainted. We would have a Thanksgiving dinner. We just started out by doing that for the office. And then the next year we invited the Graduate Student Council and the Graduate Council. And the President's office wanted to know why they weren't invited. So then we had to invite the President's office. Then we had to invite Dr. Boggs' office. But that was an opportunity informally for good exchange. Earl Mitchell always cooked the turkeys, and we had a big feed. And I think that camaraderie helped to make problems much more solvable. We looked for faculty talent and tried to help them get graduate degrees when that was identified. It's just kind of a continuing expansion effort to try to help students and faculty participate in a quality program that would serve them well when they graduated.
Well, can you share some milestones or some recognition and achievements at the college during your tenure?
Well, I think we were able in the early 70s or late 70s to secure funding for a water research center that encompassed a large number of faculty, and we were able to secure funding for an energy research center. Those centers led us to be competitive for this National Center for Groundwater Research and to be successful in getting that. So I think we were able, and then we developed the environmental science program that met the needs and demands for a lot of students and areas of the state. And that's still a very popular program, I think, through the graduate college. And we handle that so that the faculty, it was a faculty-run program, and so our effort was to always make sure that the faculty were actively involved, because they're actually the hub around which that wheel turns. So, but I think we had those programs. We began, we had the Laser Center. Dick Powell pulled together the Laser Center. And so I think in some of the areas of research that we were able to demonstrate that we were developing expertise, and we were pretty good. There's probably others too. So.
Just more broadly speaking, Norm, how have the mission and responsibilities of OOH as a graduate college and graduate colleges across the country, how have they changed during the later part of the 1900s and into the 21st century? Missions changed some, functions changed?
Well, I think more of the graduate colleges have become inclined to try to find problems that are of interest to society, economic development, engineering's new and innovative types of programs. The medical field has become, very important. Funding opportunities are good there, and we have faculty that are looking in those areas. But I think in general, what we find is that faculty, your active researchers, are the best ones to tell the people of Oklahoma or the state, why their work is important. And so we tried to utilize faculty in a way that would keep state political leaders and people of Oklahoma well informed. For a while, Jerry, we had a program where we would take a couple of buses and just load it with researchers, and we'd go around and spend a couple of days traveling and meeting all of the people across the state, especially in industries, and let them talk with researchers. And it's surprising how many new ideas came back in that we were able to initiate and get funding for. So I think communication, if there is a term maybe that says, how have they changed? I think the research academy is beginning to become more informative and better communicators, and better students are coming in as a result of it.
Looking kind of towards the future, there's some emerging future trends that you see in graduate education, changes coming down the pike. Yeah, how do you see now and 10, 20 years in the future? How's graduate education changing?
Well, I think one of our problems is that we need to try to encourage talented students to consider coming into graduate level programs. Many of them go into professional programs like the medical school and veterinary medicine and some of those activities, which is good. We have a shortage in those areas too. But we can always use talented students because, research is the basic base, I think, for knowledge that's going to solve society's problems, both health-wise, mentally and health-wise, and socially. So we can continue to work in that area. I think we still need to work on working with minorities, and we still need to work with women. We had a program when I was active. We had a program where we would hold special seminars for young ladies and try to present them with the role and scope of graduate programs and their opportunities in research and teaching. And we also had a program with minorities on that. We had a program that we trained graduate students that were going to be used in a teaching position in the university. They had a 6 weeks teaching preparation program, which stemmed a little bit from the problem that parents would say, well, my son or daughter cannot understand their graduate teaching assistant. So we tried to eliminate as best we could, or at least resolve those problems. So I think graduate level activities are going to continue to be extremely important, and we hope that the university will continue to invest handsomely in that, because it's going to benefit the state.
And what, during those years, 24 years you were dean of the graduate college, what gave you most satisfaction out of all your duties as dean?
Oh, I think seeing students achieve and graduate, you know, you're always faced, you have certain admission requirements. And we've had some students got their bachelor's degree and they had a good time when they were doing their bachelor's degree program, and so they would decide, well, they might like to come back to graduate school, but they didn't have the average, you know, or something like that. So I would say, well, and this is when I would utilize faculty. I'd find out whatever area they were in, and I'd say, well, go back over and talk to Dr. So-and-so. And so I would call the faculty member and tell him what I was doing and say, you know, just let me know, yes or no. But somebody, if you let him in, somebody needs to work with him or her and help them develop their program and get their research going and everything. And surprisingly, many of those, you know, it was not a shortage of knowledge, it was simply a shortage of commitment and not making the bars every night. But that was a very, you know, I think that was a very successful venture. But there are a lot of people that are very talented if offered an opportunity. And one of the things we tried to do was to offer the opportunity. You may recall there was a GRE exam that people used to have to take, and you had to score a certain score to get in. But we had our graduate faculty council. We looked at that very carefully, long and laboriously, and decided that it really didn't tell us what a student's talent and interest were and what their commitment was. And so we ceased to use that several years ago. But I think graduate programs are going to be very essential to improving the quality of life.
When we talk about what gave you the most satisfaction, I think I heard you talk about student success. The flip side of that coin, what gave you the most frustration is being?
Oh, I think probably one of the biggest frustrations was I felt that there were some academic areas where we should be stronger, and didn't seem like we could make a whole lot of progress in that area. Of course, you have to realize too that the type of person I would like to see come in probably would have cost the university more money than the one that they were able to hire.
And a lot of other schools were after that person too, probably.
Yeah. So, and then another thing too, we would find a young faculty member that would come in as an assistant professor, would develop a very good rapport with his graduate students and get research monies in, and then some other university would come along and offer him a much better job, and instead of us keeping him, we'd let them go to the other job and go back and try to find another, you know, assistant professor just starting a career. And I've always felt like we trained some awfully good faculty for a lot of other universities. And if we could have kept them, they would have repaid us handsomely in terms of the research money, the overhead dollars they bring in, would have been a very good return on our investment. But that's probably one of my most frustrating areas.
I understand in 2011, next year, Graduate College will be celebrating the centennial of its first, graduate courses. Can you tell me something about activities being planned? Has anyone visited with you or, talked to you about participating in any of those activities?
No, I haven't. And to my knowledge, I don't know whether they visited with any of the people that, were in the graduate college. A lot of them are still around. Odell Walker was in the graduate college, and of course Jack Vitek is at Texas A&M, but Carol Bromlin Olson now is still here. You know, and surprising, there are some graduate student, members of the Graduate Student Council that are still here. John Baird, for example, was one of the first people that really had kicked that off. And a young lady named Pam Ehlers, her husband, she's employed now here in the, I forget just exactly which program she's in, but she works with some of the of society's needy and wants. But, you know, there are a lot of people, but to the best of my knowledge, no one has ever asked for any input, so.
And I'm not sure that's that far along. I just thought maybe you might have had some preliminary conversations, but just I've been hearing that there's some plans for maybe in conjunction with Research Week or something next year that they want to talk about.
Which would be great, yeah. But you know, I don't know of any contacts that have been made. You know, I was very fortunate. There is a lectureship that was in environmental sciences that was named after me, and so I think I sent you a flyer on that and that information. But that was a very nice recognition. Environmental sciences has been a very good program. Well, I think to continue a little bit on the future, Jerry, I think one of the biggest secrets for Oklahoma State University is to identify their areas of academic strength and combine that talent so that we can be successful with other universities in competing for sizable money and
create some centers of excellence.
Centers of excellence.
Lines.
And, I think you know, the Vice President for Research is doing a good job. I've known him a long time. I have a lot of confidence in him. So, but back when I was in the graduate college, then we tried to do that in the graduate college because research was the main emphasis there also until Tom came when they split it out. Because I was the interim associate vice president for a while there in research. So. But that's one of the things, and I think one of the, you know, disappointments, sometimes it's awfully hard to pull different groups together, not because they don't want to work together, but because administrative activities and people want, you know, make sure this and make sure this.
Additional silos we talk about sometimes.
Yeah, and they don't want you bothering their faculty.
I understand. You've also served in other key administrative positions, Norm, including interim assistant vice president for research, interim provost and vice president for academic affairs, associate vice president for academic planning, before you retired in '95. Can you talk a little bit about some of these experiences, these positions, maybe just start them off one at a time, and you're assistant vice president for research. Can you talk about that position a little bit?
Well, when I came in as dean of the graduate college, Jay was he had assumed some of the roles for the VP for research. Jay Boggs. And so he very graciously passed that responsibility along to me with the, I guess, trials and tribulations that go with it. And so it worked to be a natural because you can blend research into a lot of graduate programs, and through graduate programs you can make contacts with faculty and begin to identify areas of talent that you can pull together in these centers. And that's where we were fortunate in the Water Center, in the Energy Center, the Environmental Sciences program, which was basically administered by a group of faculty from 3 different colleges. And one of the things we tried to do is to work with deans and department heads to see that if their faculty were involved, that the faculty got credit for what they did, and that the department head knew that and the dean knew that. So it's good communication was very important in those areas. Now, I was the interim vice president at the same time I was dean of the graduate college, so I was able to work both of those 2 activities together. And then when Tom came, well, he became the vice president for research and the dean of the graduate college.
That's Tom Collins.
Collins. And then it really gave me an opportunity to work with Dr. Boggs and with Ray Bowen when he was here to develop some academic areas and strengths, and to bring some of the changes that we had made in terms of communication and working with students at the graduate level down into the undergraduate programs. And so that let us begin to look at academic programs and see where our strengths were and where we might need to improve on some of those activities. We followed academic performance. I worked closely with the state regents for higher education. We were very interested in what other students were doing and what stories they were telling, because the competition for the dollar, was a big problem. And so if they were going to tell a story about what they were doing in this area, we wanted to be able to tell one, and we'd like for our light to shine a little brighter.
Sure.
In some of those things. So in the academic planning and all, I had the opportunity to work really more closely with deans at the other undergraduate level.
Could you kind of explain a little more? Because most people could probably get their arms more around provost and vice president of research, but vice president for academic planning. And what did all that entail? Your responsibilities?
Basically, what I did was to serve as a resource base and a thought and idea base for Dr. Boggs and for the president. And we did some behind the scenes political, maneuvering with the state regents and the like, and so to let them know what all was going on up here. So if somebody else told them something, well, they'd have the full story across the state educational systems. But that was basically my role and scope in that, would be to handle those academic programs that were a part of the undergraduate college, and give Dr. Boggs and the president a little opportunity to spend some time doing things maybe off campus that would be helpful.
It was a little bit of a think tank also.
It was a think tank.
Where you're going, how you position yourselves.
And we used lots of committees of deans and department heads and faculties. If we had something that we wanted to think or talk about, well, we would reach out and identify select faculty and our deans, department heads, and bring them in and kind of hobnob and see what looked like would be a good direction to go.
Norman, looking back, actually you've had such a myriad set of responsibilities and experiences, and almost unique to anybody in the history of our university. You've seen it nearly half a century now here at Oklahoma State, maybe actually a little over since you first came. In what ways has the university changed? How has it changed in the last 30, 40, 50 years?
Well, I think change, sometimes it's kind of hard to identify in terms of pinpointing certain things. But I think Oklahoma State University, while still a land-grant college, land-grant institution, has achieved recognition for academic performance and capabilities in a number of other areas. The College of Business has grown quite well, and Human Services, College of Human Services. So there are a lot of areas where there's been tremendous expansion that basically tells the people, say, look, our university has a lot of talent and capability and can do a lot of things. We just kind of need to work with them and find out what we need to do and to go from there. I would like to think, back when I was, I don't remember the years, but I was always active in the Chamber of Commerce. I tried to be active in a lot of activity, as was Dick Poole, and Dick was president of the Chamber 1 year. I was president of the Chamber 1 year. I also was a co-chair on the United Fund Drive. If you've never done those are two things everybody ought to do at least once. But I tried to breach, I guess, any hurdles with the local community and work and assist the president any way that I could in that regard. So, and I think I would like to see that continue. I'm not sure, I'm not sure that there's really any interest much by some faculty and administrators in doing that. And, Bill Hughes and myself and Ed Burris, those names ought to ring a bell. We kind of enjoyed working behind the scenes in the politics, and in fact, we were the crew that convinced Wilson Bentley that he needed to run for mayor and supported him in that activity. So, I think there's a place there for a role for some faculty if they want to be more active in the community in downtown areas. But I think basically our role is simply we need to take the progeny from the people of Oklahoma and give them a real good education so that when they leave that they are employable, and we need to try to figure out a way to get more industry and other employment opportunities to come into Oklahoma.
Picking up on your thoughts there, Norm, how will OSU need to evolve and be different in the future? How will it need to change to face the challenges coming down the road?
Well, a lot of that goes to leadership, as to where the president wants the university and institution to go. And I think right now we're probably in one of the brightest opportunities that we have with our leadership at the top. Kind of depends upon what you want your president to do, but I think our president needs to let the people of the state know what his university is doing and how good it is and what all they're contributing. And I think the faculty need to be in a position of supporting him in that endeavor and activity. But I think Dr. Hargis we're very fortunate to have him.
Well, what do you think about the $1 billion campaign on branding success? How important is that to the future of the university?
I think that's very important. We need a source of money. We have a lot of academic programs, a lot of research interest. We need to be able to provide some remuneration for faculty. We need to keep good faculty, and it takes money. And we need scholarships that we can provide for students to come to the university. The economic situation is very difficult right now. I'm not sure whether finances is the main reason a lot of people don't come to the universities. They say it is, but I'm not sure it is, because there are lots of jobs around town that people are paying $10 an hour, and they can't find anybody to take it. Now, to you and me, $10 an hour has been awfully good. So, I think when people talk about not having enough money to go to school, some of those young men and women do need financial help, and we need to have scholarships and fellowships to provide those for them. So,
Well, were you encouraged by the allocation? You've been talking about some of those where the president's allocated that $1 billion, like about, I think, $500 million of it's going to scholarships and about another $300 million to endowed chairs. Is that exciting for you?
That's exciting, because I think what that endowed chair program is going to do is going to permit them to recognize good faculty and to keep them. And I think the scholarships and fellowships are going to provide an opportunity for the good students to continue their education at Oklahoma State University. Jerry, in the past, we found that when we were out recruiting for graduate student recruitment is vicious. We ran into the problem with money because our departments simply didn't have enough money to go head to head for good graduate students with a lot of the other universities, even in the Big 8 or Big 12, whatever. So those fellowship opportunities are going to permit the faculty, I think, to go head to head with some exceptionally good schools. And in doing so, it's going to provide a base that I think will be very meaningful and productive to Oklahoma State University. And raising money, raising money is interesting because, see, I started raising money when I went into the dean's office because we really didn't have an active vice president for research, so I would work with colleges and departments. Not that Jay wasn't doing a good job, it just was not well defined yet. And we pushed for that. But it's important that faculty have funds, and I think this will be a meaningful way.
Just asking about names again, I'm going to challenge you one more time, but just generally, you've worked with numerous, literally hundreds of individuals at OSU dating back to 1954, which is 3 years after President Bennett's death, including presidents, regents, administrators, faculty. Can you mention some individuals who have been, significant, helpful in moving academically, moving the university forward?
Well, a lot of them have retired now, but Ruth and Russ Dobson were scholars that we relied on quite heavily. We have a group of faculty members in engineering, Joe Mize. Of course, you see, the people I used to rely on have, for the most part, retired now. But those people, a long time ago, and this is probably in the 70s, I was approached by another university to join their administration as the vice president for instruction and research. It was a joint position, which sounded good to me. And so Jane and I went for an interview, and then we went back a second time, and then we went back a third time. And in the interview process, the Board of Regents told Jane, they said, now, we have arranged for y'all to have a large tract of land to put your cattle on. So we would hope that you do not use the cattle as an excuse for not accepting this job, because we're going to offer your husband this job. And we've arranged for y'all to have access to this land for 5 years, and then during that interim, well, you can look around and find something else. And so, I've always laughed. I told her, I said, she's probably the only wife of a candidate that they ever offered to find land that they could put their cows on. But there were some other things that, anyway, I did not take that position. We laugh about that. But one of the things, just to show you what it is, is I also ask, I have a list of 10 or 12 faculty. And I said, now, I'd like to bring some of those faculty with me. They're good. They're doing research. They're good teachers. And I would expect to present their credentials to their departments and the faculty there would have to approve them, for so forth and so on. But I said, if everything goes through and the faculty approve them, well, I would like to bring them from Oklahoma State University. And they said, well, they'd look at that, and they did, and they looked back and they said, any you want to bring, we'll set them up. And that was a little different approach. I sometimes wonder if I made a mistake by staying here with all those types of activities. But anyway, but that just shows you the emphasis I place on some faculty members, that they were really, really good.
Well, were there some, presidents that were helpful to you that you really appreciate looking back and thinking about?
Bob Com. Bob was extremely helpful. Of course, he was the president that appointed me to the job. And he always listened, and he paid attention, and he would review, and he would critique, and he would offer ideas, which was extremely helpful in that period of time. Bob was a very good president. Ray Bowen was a person that I really enjoyed working with. And then
Ray was provost and vice president.
Yeah. And then, he was acting president for a little while in there, somewhere in there. John Campbell, despite some of his problems, was extremely helpful. John gave us the money to start the freshman research scholar program, and was very interested in improving the graduate level recognition nationally. We utilized outside review teams to come in and tell us how good we were in certain areas. There was an organization, the Graduate College Council of the United States, that was an organization that consisted of graduate deans, and you could get program reviews and evaluations through that. We used that a lot. But Ray Bowen was good, and Jim, our senator now, was a big help. So, but I think as far as really taking an interest in what we were doing, well, Bob Com got us off to a real good start, and then that was followed with Ray Bowen.
Amazingly, during your years, we talked about your administrative responsibilities, dean of the graduate college and assistant vice president, and some of your interim positions. You also remain actively engaged in academic research and other scholarly activities. How are you able to balance these, Norm? Did you sleep any?
Well, I had lots of help from my wife. She took care of a lot of things. But like I say, the research support, I guess 3 of the 4 projects that I had support for were joint with other faculty members. And I relied, on them a great deal. We had a lot to contribute, and they had a lot to contribute. And working together, well, it made it easier to be competitive for money. I had, one time I had 7 graduate students and 5 postdocs and 5 or 6 undergraduate students that were in my research lab. I used to, for years, I taught the freshman course in bacteriology, microbiology. And I would pick out the top 3 or 4 students in that, and I would invite them to come into the lab and work with my graduate students. And by the time that they got their bachelor's degree, they were the equivalent of lots of people that get a master's degree somewhere else. Very, very well trained. So I kind of fed my research program with those individuals. And then we were fortunate. I had some faculty contacts at other universities that would recommend their students come here. But we spent lots of hours. There were very few days that, Saturdays and Sundays were not spent over in the research lab. I had facilities over in the Life Sciences building. And so I spent a lot of time. And then I had a procedure where if my graduate students had or needed to see me, all they had to do was come over to the graduate college, and the administrative assistant would see that we had a chance to talk, because it's important to them. And I always worried a little bit about that arrangement not being real fair, because before I went into administration, I loved to be right there at the research lab so you can see the results roll off, and you can talk and carry on. And whenever a student would come and ask to work in my lab, I said, now, there's a disadvantage, there's a shortfall, and I said, I'm over in this other building, but if you ever want to talk, all you have to do is come over. And that worked. That worked pretty well, because on weekends we'd play catch up, and I'd spend several hours with them in the research activities. But
When you talk about some of your scholarly activities, some of your professional experiences, you talked about some of them earlier in our conversation, but I mean, National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. You've had 125 refereed papers and present. Can you talk a little bit about some of your scholarly and scientific activities?
Well, I got involved with the Atomic Energy Project because the work on my doctorate dealt with the effects of some radiation on recombinant DNA. And so I followed up on that when I first came up to Stillwater. That was one of the areas that I continued. The other area, Darrell Berlin and I, we were working with some anti-cancer agents, and in order to make that agent more effective, we would couple it with a molecule that would help that large molecule get into the malignant cell, but not get into the normal cell. And Darrell is a master at making molecules. He can take these, you may call them chicken wire nucleus, where you got all the little benzene rings, and put a group up here or a group up here. And so we were looking at permeability differences between a malignant cell and a normal cell, and working to find some way of getting the anti-cancer agent into the malignant cell and maybe not produce much harm in the normal cell. And so Darrell was, he was a master at that, and we had a couple of 3 patents out of that have been active. So a couple of different areas there, basically. And then my work with radiation and the DNA effect was the reason that I was back in the Washington area for a while. But
Norm, you received numerous honors and recognition for your academic and scientific contributions. Can you share some that are especially meaningful to you?
Oh, well, I think, recognition by your peers is awfully nice, and I had 2 or 3 lectureship awards that I was recognized for. I think one of the first things that I really enjoyed was when I was selected as the outstanding undergraduate teacher in College of Arts and Sciences back 2 or 3 years after I started. You see, because I enjoyed teaching. And but I think that, and then have been elected as a fellow of the American Academy, and another fellow of the Oklahoma Academy, and the outstanding scientist in Oklahoma, and those things. It's nice to have recognition.
You're a fellow of the American Academy of Microbiology, a fellow of the Oklahoma Academy of Science, outstanding researcher, I think, state of Oklahoma 1 year by the Oklahoma Academy of Sciences recognition. I recall you're in the Oklahoma Higher Education Hall of Fame, a couple other halls of fame. I could go on and on, but you're being pretty modest there.
Well, and North Texas recognized me as the outstanding graduate one year. So there were a number of things that I'm not sure whether you deserve all of them or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get them.
Norm, I think the amazing thing is, we've said it before, but trying to synthesize and bring it together. Many of these accomplishments and achievements in your research was done, as we were talking about just a few minutes ago, at the same time that you're spending untold hours in administration and key administrative positions in the university, which is highly unusual, to say the least. And you were able to accomplish those things. What a legacy, what a story there. Your academic career at OSU spanned 41 years, I guess. My next question is kind of, what kept you at OSU all those years? You talked about you had a couple of opportunities 2 or 3 times in your career, and I'm sure you had a lot of opportunities at other institutions. What kept you at Oklahoma State University?
My colleagues, the opportunity to work with other scientists, very talented scientists, in the research area and arena. We enjoyed Stillwater. I had 4 daughters, and so we felt like Stillwater was a very nice place to raise a family. And when we came back from Washington was when Jane and I bought a little tract of land and put a few cows on it, and so that gave her something, to do. And you see, she came back after we got the cows. She got another degree in animal sciences.
Okay.
So she's a very good cowgirl. But we just, as a family, kind of felt like that this was a good place, and I enjoyed it. And the university's been very good to me. All the time when I first came to the university as an assistant professor, the university has been very good to me. So, and the administration has been good, and could have made a lot more money elsewhere. But I think that, and I never cease to want for good students. My graduates have gone out and done well. We've maintained contact over the years, and it's a pleasure to know and to see that they do well. We, on my doctoral students that were in the science area, I had a requirement. Well, I had several requirements. One of them was they were going to take 2 courses in business. And so they'll say, well, why? And I'll say, well, in the science area, as you go to work and you progress up a company's chain of command, you're going to reach a point to where they're going to say, okay, now, you're at the top research post that we offer. We're looking for an administrator. Would you be interested in that administrative realm? Because a lot of them, only go to a vice president for research, and they'll go on up here, as a president of an administrative unit. And I said, if you have a couple of courses in business, then that will make you a more viable candidate. And 4 of them right now went through the business route on that. So
where are some of the institutions where some of your graduate students are located, just offhand?
Well, I've had 2 in Eli Lilly. I've had 2 in Abbott Laboratories. I have a graduate student that is at the University of Georgia Medical School. I have a graduate student, and he's a department head there now. I have a graduate student that's a dean at the University of Tennessee.
Dean.
Mm-hmm. And they have a dean of research projects there, and that's what Jerry is interested in. I have a graduate student that is a full professor at the University of Washington, and a graduate student that's a full professor at the University of Wisconsin. And I've got 2 graduate students that are at the MD Anderson Cancer Hospital.
Wow.
They were some that were working on this, molecular complex types of activity. So they've been very fortunate. They've done well. They're good.
Impressive. You got to be very proud of that, Norman.
Oh, we are.
We're not talking slippery rock or
No.
something. It's a key place.
No.
It's great.
And I've got some master students that scattered around in the teaching positions, There's 3 young ladies that did awfully well, and well, they had families, so they didn't want to go on for their doctorate, so we got them an awfully good teaching position whenever.
That's great. I'm looking back on your career. Anything you'd have done differently?
No, I think, way back, I'm sure glad I didn't go into the medical field, because I would not have met my bride, my wife, and she has been a real asset in this activity. She's active. She's active in a lot of things in town as well, but she used to entertain my graduate students. We were a very close-knit group. And she used to entertain my graduate students, and we would feed them well and host them well, the graduate students and their families. And so whenever we would have, we've had 5 baccalaureates come into our department and give speeches. And so I would invite all of the graduate students in departments and areas to come out to the house, and we would have the speaker come out there, and just a night of relaxation and a beer or something, But then the next day, that speaker would meet with all those graduate students without any faculty. If you have faculty in with a bunch of graduate students and they want to talk to somebody, the faculty is kind of a damper. And I had all of those people tell me that, they really enjoyed that. The speaker said that's the first time that they'd gone to a university and they'd had a chance to talk to graduate students by themselves. So they really enjoyed it.
Chance for candor there.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then we had another one. You can put this on the tape, be all right. But I had a young lady that worked for me. Her father was a dirt contractor. Her husband was going to the School of Engineering. And she worked in the lab. And so her father was a dirt contractor down in Idabel, Oklahoma. And so he came to see me. He says, I brought you a jug of white lightning that will defy description. He says, it's the best you'll ever find. So-and-so down there, it's got this still. And he says, it's great. And so one of the things, whenever we had these big shots from all these other universities coming, after a meal and all, we'd give them a little tumbler full of white lightning. And I want you to know, that was the talk of university meetings. Whenever we'd go somewhere, they'd come up, and say, "Nora, how are you?" And everybody standing around there would learn that.
Waiting with their tumbler.
A tumbler of white lightning.
This kind of leads to my next point. And there's another side to Norman Durham that a lot of people don't know. Rancher, Angus cattle breeder, water conservation.
Herefords, I like it. We breed Herefords, yeah.
Can you talk about some of these interests? I mean, you sort of alluded to them on and off in the interview, but talk a little more about your Hereford.
Well, I grew up with cattle. Jane did not, but she became very interested in it, and so we bought a little tract of land, and then we bought a few cows, and as our program progressed, we sold that tract of land and bought a little bigger tract of land.
And where we are now. West of town.
Yeah. And we raised Hereford cattle, and we had 4 grandchildren, and they all became interested in showing. So we we worked toward developing some show stock for the grandkids, and people would ask, what do you do on your vacation? And I said, well, we loaded up 2 trailers with animals and hay and equipment, and we spent a week in Perry, Georgia in July. Now, you talk about hot, But that was a family affair, and we really enjoyed it. And so the grandkids are old enough now that they don't show anymore, but they were very fortunate. They won their share. Excuse me. So and that was a part of the family activity that we really enjoyed, and so it's. But in the ranching now, Jane and I, we enjoy it. We have made a lot of friends through the cattle, and we have friends all over the nation. And Josh, one of the grandsons, was on the National Junior Hereford Board and was president for 2 years of that board, and he's made a lot of friends, and so it's been one of the component parts that we've really enjoyed. So that's a way of getting to know various people. And in Oklahoma, I've met a lot of people that I would not have had a chance to meet if we hadn't had the cattle.
You've had some recognition in the breeding business too, have you not? Can you speak to that a little bit?
We have. Well, Jane has been on the national board for the women, and I have, and she was just recently elected to the Oklahoma Hereford Association Board. First woman to ever be elected to the Oklahoma Hereford Association Board. She's been president of the Polettes, which is the women's auxiliary. But we both served at the national level on both of those boards, and so we've been very fortunate.
National or State Breeder of the Year 1 year for
Yeah.
Hereford cattle breeding.
Yeah, and 2 or 3 other things there. She's
State Hereford Hall of Fame.
State Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. In your spare time, I'm thinking, let's see, during the week you're administrator, on weekends you're doing research. When were you, when did you fit this in?
Well, you just have good people that work for you, Jerry. I was extremely fortunate, in my tenure in administration. I had some very talented people. So and when you find good people and they have good ideas, you just let them have it to go with. That's.
What else about Norm Durham would people not know? What if someone's one thing probably about shocking thing most people don't know, Norm, what would that be?
Oh, Jerry, I don't know. Most people probably don't know I served on the Payne County Fair Board for 18 years. When I first went on the board, the fairground was down at 12th and Perkins, and first year I went down there in order to get over to where the cattle were. They had a 2x12 across the ditch, and if you were lucky and got across that and didn't fall in the water. So I was fortunate. I had a part to participate in helping to build some of the things we have now. I was on the Payne County Excise Board for 12 years. Enjoyed that. Had a chance to meet a lot of people with that. Sally Banks and Oliver Kinsey were on that board with me, and I really enjoyed that. Tenure and time with the chamber I've really enjoyed, and I've served as an officer for several state and national organizations. Gosh, I don't know whether this.
What values in other people do you appreciate most?
Oh, I really enjoy working with people that are sincere. I really enjoy working with people that will communicate what their thoughts are and where they stand, whether you agree or not. I think it's important to know where they stand and what their interests are. And it's extremely easy to associate with people like that and to work with them. Right now I'm on this Payne County excise tax board. That gives me a chance to visit with people from other communities in the county as we look at the excise tax program. But I enjoy people that are forthright and don't try to hide anything. And if they have a position, I like to know what it is, and I'll be happy to tell them what my position is, and we work awfully well together that way.
Looking back, we've talked about a lot of people, places, events. Have there been some special memories, some highlights for you in your time at OSU? Some things pop out in your mind, you think about that?
Well, I'd be less than truthful if I didn't say the recognition and awards that came while a faculty member were greatly appreciated. I laugh a little bit. When I first came as an assistant professor, you see, the second year I was here, I had a research grant. And when I came, I was half-time teaching in arts and sciences and half-time research in the Ag Experiment Station. So it was probably one of the first times that arts and sciences and the experiment station had ever split an appointment. And they set that up because they knew I was interested in research. But I think within that, and that worked awfully well for me. And then the recognitions and the awards. I was pleased to be asked to be dean of the graduate college, and worked well. The other advancements and follow-throughs on that. Somebody says, well, why did you retire when you did? And I retired because my last graduate student graduated in 91. Now, I retired in 95, and I had put in lots of time and effort, and I'll just kind of hand it to them. And so that's what we've done. Somebody asked me if I wanted an office, and I said no. I'll just use the provost office. If there's anything I want or need, I'll come in. And so I went in every once in a while and use a fax machine or something. But for the most part, I've maintained contact with a lot of faculty outside and off the campus, and so that's been quite adequate. I was trying to remember what else. It's hard to.
So many good things.
Well, they've all been very good, and they had good health. And
final question, how do you hope people remember Norman Durham?
Well, I've always tried to be friendly. I've tried to be truthful. I've tried to remain on a positive note. I'd rather congratulate somebody for something than I would criticize them for something. So I've always tried to congratulate people for their accomplishments, and I've always told them I've enjoyed working with them when those times and opportunities come. I've tried to give time and effort to some associations that I think and I hope I've benefited and contributed to their progress during that period of time. But most of all, I just hope that when they think of me, that they'll think of the good things and maybe not the bad ones.
Forget the bad ones. Okay. Norman, we're talking about some fundraising and some other things here.
We were talking about raising money for research, and I was always impressed with the fact that it was easier to raise money for graduate college research than whenever you had a winning football team than when you had a losing football team. Now, some of my colleagues in the academic world kind of look at me with jaundiced eye on that, but it was, in fact, it was true. And I had not been in the graduate college and research area long, searching for money, when a friend of mine named Myron Roderick saw me one day, and he says, "Let's go get a bite to eat." So we went and grabbed a hamburger, and he said, "Now, I sure was glad to see that you moved into the dean's office." And he said, "If there's ever anything I can do to help you, well, let me know." I said, "Well, we sure do need money for graduate scholarships." And he says, "Well, how much you need?" And I said, "Well, if we had 10 of those at about $2,500, I said, that would be adequate." Which back then, that was a pretty good sum, So he says, "Well, I'll see what I can do." And it was not long after that he had found people that were willing, donors that were willing to give money to the graduate program, that were very strong supporters of Oklahoma State University wrestling. So I use that as an example, to say the contributions of all avenues of the university go together, and we need to work closely together, and everybody needs to be able to tell a good story so that we can market our product.
That's great. We appreciate that story on Myron. Anything else?
Whenever I really needed Larry, if it was a critical and I needed a signature, I could always find him watching football practice.
Where to find him?
You may have been on the field at that time. Okay.
No, I was on the field a lot earlier than that. But
I can't think of anything else.
appreciate it.
I hope it's been helpful.
It is. Thanks.